Welcome back, RPG Chooms. This video is the third entry in our ongoing Tales of the Red series, where we delve together in some published scenarios for Cyberpunk RED. This time, we'll take a look at Staying Vigilant, the 7th adventure in Tales of the Red. Like we did with other scenarios in this playlist, we will start from an overview of the events, the tale, and then we're gonna move on to some advice on running the scenario for GMs. Finally, we'll wrap this up with a critical evaluation of the scenario. Of course, there will be plenty of spoilers ahead, so if you intend to play this scenario, don't go any further. Just copy-paste this video's link to your GM and come back later to watch it, much like I did with the scenario itself. Yes, because I didn't run this one. This was the first scenario ever GM'd by one of the dearest people in my life. Her introduction to the wonders of GMing. She took it to heart, and I admit I had a ton of fun playing it with Skylar Darkson, whose story and character sheet you can find in a video I recently uploaded for the NPC Codex series. So, as I was saying, I didn't GM this scenario. I played it, had fun with it, and then read it from the book. And now here I am giving you my opinions on it. Please be aware that we will be touching on many crucial events in the scenario, and if you've watched the video, you're likely gonna lose any surprise effect when playing it. Okay, with that aside, we can jump straight into Staying Vigilant. Staying Vigilant puts the characters on the trail of a mysterious cyberpsycho, who already flatlined 3 Edge Runner crews sent after her. The characters get the job by Trace Santiago, son of the legendary nomad Santiago, and renowned media in his own right. Trace wants the characters to shed light on the matter, and presents them with the result of his investigations. So far, 3 crews have died in 3 days. According to Trace, the first 2 crews were newbies, but the third had a decent track record. The dead Edge Runners all had cyberware, and at least some of it was fried. Everyone was killed with bladed weapons, and the victims all had firearms, although few shots were fired. A clerk working for a food store, an oasis across the street from the first murder site, saw a single figure he defined as all chromed out, running away from the building. This is what started the rumors about the killer being a cyberpsycho. Trace also has 2 pieces of visual evidence. One shows a female figure running out of the food store and away from the scene, while the other is a photo he purchased from a courier company whose delivery drone was passing over Red, that shows a lone figure in an alleyway, surrounded by prone bodies. This was the 3rd crew murdered. The 3 crews have one thing in common. They all have taken jobs from Lowball, a mid-level fixer who works with various corporate clients. Trace has made a list of other crews Lowball works with, and there's only 2 left. One of which is kind of known around the afterlife and is led by a solo named Hardhat. They have gone to ground in a warehouse close to the afterlife, and Trace wants the PCs to go over there and see what's happening. Maybe Hardhat and their crew will know more, since Lowball is not answering to Trace in any way. Trace is stitched up and sends a drone along with the group to get the footage for his story. He also mentions that the drone will help him talk with the party, but see my tips for more on that. So the task is clear. The PCs need to go to a warehouse and talk to a group of Edge Runners who has worked for Lowball, the fixer all 3 dead crews had worked for in the past. They'll need to find more about the cyberpsycho terrorizing the street and help Trace Santiago get to the bottom of the matter. Trace's coordinates take the crew on a path that skirts the hot zone along the edge of the old city center. The characters have to pass through a maze of tent cities and crowded alleyways, near to bursting with scavengers and homeless people. There are 2 routes through this area, either through the tent city or around it. The former might lead to a fight with some reckoners prophetizing the end of the world and demanding donations. The latter ends in a back alley brawl with some scavengers. There's really no difference between the two, at least structurally. It's a choice, yes, but that's not so relevant. After that, the crew finally gets to the warehouse. The place is seemingly abandoned, but is actually pretty well guarded. The defense system includes 4 observation cameras on the exterior, 2 inside, 2 laser grids, and even an automated turret with a heavy SMG. Sneaking in will be no easy task for the characters. And inside, RHAT and her crew, if you play the scenario as written, won't make your character's life much easier because they will attack on sight. Turns out they wanted to ambush the Cyberpsycho here. The warehouse is full of boxes bearing the Continental Brands logo, a first clue of what's really happening with all the story. RHAT and her crew are here to take down the alleged Cyberpsycho on behalf of Lobel, the Fixer. They won't fight to the death, and as soon as things start to look bad, they will try to retreat, leaving the PCs in the warehouse. Here Trace will take the PCs by the hand, something I really find obnoxious, as I will say in the tips section. He asks the PCs to check out the boxes so that the party can discover that they contain weapons, not food. Trace asks all the questions. Why would the Megacorp be outfitting an Edgerunner crew holed up in a warehouse on the edge of the hot zone? What does this have to do with a Cyberpsycho? As soon as Trace finishes his musings, a disposable cell phone on the table rings. It's Lobel. When he realizes that the characters defeated RHAT, he tries to pay for their services, offering 2,000 Eddies per person for taking down the red-headed Cyberpsycho vigilante. The call has just ended when the killer makes her appearance. The characters see a heavily chromed woman who doesn't really look like a Cyberpsycho. She is red-headed and matches the material the PCs have seen, so there's no doubt she is the killer they were looking for. But is she really a killer? Unlike RHAT, she's not looking for a fight. If the PCs will listen, Nat, for this is her name, will explain that she killed all those Edgerunners because they wanted to kill her. And if the PCs don't think about talking with Nat, Trace's drone makes sure they do, by addressing the woman directly, realizing she's a nomad and offering her help on his behalf through the characters. As you will see, I don't really like the execution of this part, but the story is cool. Nat is a nomad whose whole pack was killed by some mercs working for Continental Brands. She's out for vengeance now, and that's why she came here in the warehouse. Someone told her that she will find intel on the man behind the attack on her pack here, in this warehouse. However, it seems like it was a trap. She's glad she didn't have to kill another Edgerunner crew, unless the PCs want to fight her despite what Trace says and take Lobel's offer. If a fight breaks out, the PCs are in for a nice challenge. Nat is very strong, although she's alone and economy action will slowly work against her eventually. But she may well take down a few members of the crew before that. If the PCs listen to what Trace has to say, or if they realize by themselves that Nat is not the one to blame here, they can try to help her. Trace himself suggests the idea to take her to the Aldo Caldo camp, where Nat could rest and plan her next move. But the media wants to see some action now and demands the PCs to return to the afterlife to pick him up. Honestly, I don't really like this either. My impression is that the writer wanted so bad to make Trace look cool and give him a crucial role in the story, but ended up overdoing it. This level of personal involvement by the quest giver may well steal the scene and let the PCs feel like they are being railroaded around. Anyway, let's return to the story. If the PCs killed or subdued Nat, the scenario is over. They get paid by Lobel and that's it. For a while, they'll feel uncomfortable at the afterlife, since Trace feels betrayed by them and the story has gotten around. While Rogue and some Edgerunners give the crew the stink eye, however, other teams are on their side, since they essentially offed a serial killer who was decimating the Edgerunners. On the other hand, if the PCs accept Trace's idea, they return to the afterlife instead, pick up the media and get in a vehicle, which might be their own or Trace's open roof truck. As soon as they leave the afterlife, a gyrocopter swoops in, with a sniper leaning out and taking shots at the crew. This leads to a fun and engaging chase scene between an aerial and a land vehicle. I really enjoyed this part of the scenario as a player. The gyrocopter tries to get the sniper in range while at the same time staying out of the character's range. The scene is tense, action-packed and adrenalinic, and this also involves some maneuver checks for the character who is driving, while the others fire at the gyrocopter or take down the sniper. My GM set it in the Badlands, and I think it was even better than how it would have been in the city. It had that Mad Max feeling to it that really got to me. If the characters prevail, Nat is taken to the relative safety of the Aldo Caldo camp. Nat thanks them and mentions that Trace will help her find whoever is responsible for the death of her pack. As for the characters, she owes them a favor. Trace is satisfied and glad the PCs did the right thing. The only one he thought he was right anyway. He pays 100 eddies each head runner and now has some hot stuff on Continental brands. He will dispose the Megacorp for the attacks on Nomad convoys on Never Blink News a week later, and if one of the character is a media, they will get a byline in the story. The crew really made a difference because the story they dug out has enough evidence to endanger the relationship between Continental brands and several nomad nations, prompting the Megacorp to scale back on raiding operation. At least for a while. Okay, let's get to some tips and considerations on this scenario. I'll start from my main concern with this adventure. Trace's presence is a little bit too intrusive for my tastes. The characters have only the illusion of choice, but what you're doing, basically, is to execute Trace's will. Go to the warehouse, talk with Nat instead of fighting her, come pick me up at the afterlife, get Nat to the Aldo Caldo camp, and so on. There's no real freedom of choice for the PCs here. The only alternative they are given is to betray Trace and fight Nat. That is not bad in itself, and it's a solid branching path, but I think the scenario makes taking up Lowball's offer a very unpopular choice, since Trace is there, through the drone, to tell the party what he wants them to do and how they should deal with Nat. Let's start with the drone then. Before setting up how the whole story will take place, you should be aware that if you take the scenario as written, then there's gonna be a little drone hovering around the characters all the time. This drone belongs to the fixer for this job, who is a media actually, Trace Santiago himself. The drone follows the characters, recording everything. And I'm pretty cool with that. But there will be times in the scenario when Trace is going to speak through the drone. In this wonderful artwork for the adventure, you can even see the drone projecting an holographic image of Trace. So, well, I think this is where things start to get a bit more problematic, at least for me. Potentially. Because the drone is going to steer the characters in a certain direction a few times over the course of the scenario, and it's going to intervene in the climactic moment when the group meets its target, Nat, for the very first time. The drone allows the media to be very present in the story, and I think it may strip some freedom away from the players as they deal with the interesting moral choice of deciding whether to side with Nat or to sell her off to Lowball and get a reward. In that case, Trace clearly states that he wants the PCs to help Nat. He will even get in the middle of the dramatic scene by leading the negotiations and spontaneously offer a way out for Nat. This makes the scene so much less tense, in my opinion. I want my players to handle the situation, and I want them to make the enemies or friends' decision about Nat on themselves. And as you can see, the drone may hinder that. It's a railroading tool, really, and I don't like it. So how about we try and fix that? If you like the idea of the drone following the party and recording everything, then you could just avoid making it talk or project holograms. I think the whole idea of some cool action scenes being recorded and later broadcast on news is too good an opportunity to pass up. Imagine your player's reaction when, a few sessions from now, you describe how the news portrayed them in action while taking a shot at the sniper on a gyrocopter 200 meters away from them from a speeding van. That had the potential to be really epic. And we don't want to waste it, right? So what you can do instead, if you want to keep the drone, but if you want to reduce the quest giver's interference in this scenario, is to just say that Trace's drone cannot speak. You don't even need to bring that up to the table, just don't make it talk. Maybe the drone can talk, but Santiago wants to see how the PCs handle the situation with that themselves. And if they look like they are inclined to help her themselves, then Santiago chimes in and offers to take her to the Aldo Caldo. This helps them get on the right track without railroading them. And if you don't want to make the drone speak, then go ahead and make Trace call one of the PCs on their agent, or send them a quick text message proposing the Aldo Caldo solution. As I usually say in these guides, player agency is so important, guys. As GMs, you should do your utmost to make the players feel like they are leading the game. I personally feel like Trace's drone can strip some of the agency from them, but you know your party best. Maybe they are not particularly proactive, or they don't care about agency and just want to be led around. In that case, you can and I think you should follow the scenario as written. I just have some minor concerns on how Trace is controlling the drone though. He doesn't give the PCs any portable net architecture, so how's the drone operating? I frankly don't know. If you do, please tell me in the comments. I would appreciate it. In any case, I think it would be cool if Trace gave the characters a portable net architecture in the form of the high-tech backpack. This would certainly draw some unwanted attentions in the slums. Also, this gives the characters the chance to ditch Trace for good by just leaving the backpack behind. There are some in the community who don't like the way Trace comes off as in this scenario. For example, see this post over on Reddit by Sparky McDibben. If you want to do without Trace and turn this scenario into an investigation by having the PCs work for Lobo, I suggest you take a look at their post. I'll link it in the shard down below. Let's change subject now, but not too much. This is still about railroading. So, in the scenario, Hardhat and their headrunners are said not to be interested in talking, literally. Well, now that's a simplistic way of transforming a potentially interesting encounter into a hard-coded shootout. I personally don't like that, but if it suits your tastes, then definitely go ahead and make the bullets fly. I just want to give you an alternative though. And this alternative is not particularly fancy either. What I want you to do is to go on Appendix C of Tales of the Red and read the entries for Hardhat and her crew. And read them very carefully. Perhaps even take some notes. They are all there. Bullhorn, Hardhat, Spanner, and Sledge. Make them feel like real people, not just mindless goons whose only purpose is to aggro the characters. Come on, you even have artworks to them. A very cool thing you could do here is to foreshadow some of these edge runners. This is easy to do if you are prepping ahead of time. Hardhat and the others are edge runners after all, so maybe when the PCs hang out at the Forlorn Hope or at the Afterlife, they can randomly meet one of them. Oh, and if you're prepping ahead, you could maybe mention a news in the scrim sheet where a shipment of food laid by Jode's Nomad pack was attacked by unknown assailants. This will help you when the characters finally get to meet Nat. If you read Hardhat's description in the appendix, you will find out that she's just another solo hungry for reputation and status, not unlike some PCs, most likely. She's also described as being shrewd enough to realize it takes some time and effort. So why she should attack without even thinking if the PCs offer her a good deal? Just because you need to insert a combat scene? Well, you know I'm no fan of that kind of approach. If the players want to parlay, I don't see why they shouldn't. Of course, if the characters attack first, or if they are found out sneaking around the warehouse, Hardhat will probably respond in kind and attack. But the decision is up to you. Role-playing NPCs in a plausible way, keeping in mind their motivations, is one of the funniest parts of being a GM. So enjoy it and don't surrender to the railroading demon. Unless you really want to, and your players like it that way, of course. But here you could say, hey Joe, what if the characters manage to bring Hardhat and her crew on their side? How do I handle the encounter with Nat? Well, let me start by saying that bringing Hardhat on their side shouldn't be easy. She wants reputation, not money. The easiest thing the characters can do is to scare her off with a showdown. But if the characters do manage to bring Hardhat on their side, then just go ahead and roleplay the upcoming event. Nat arrives, and she probably feels threatened by so many edge runners. She'll be less inclined to shoot, I think, but also more cautious and suspicious. Here you should make an important call. What do Hardhat and their crew do? Because if they attack, Nat is going to answer and the fight will ensue. Maybe Nat surrenders at a certain point or she tries to flee. You are in charge here. You decide how the NPCs react. Did the PCs specify they want to parlay with Nat? Are they in a position where Hardhat and the others will respect their authority and let them talk with Nat before opening fire? This all depends on previous interaction and your judgment. So go ahead and have fun with the scene. When lowball calls Hardhat, don't feel limited by the very specific checks the scenario suggests. They are suggestions. They are there to give you an idea of a reasonable difficulty value for the checks the characters can attempt, and maybe as option you can give to your players, but only if they seem stuck. Otherwise, let them decide how to approach the situation. If the players decide to fight Nat, be sure to make her shine. And how do you do that? By carefully reading her stat, first of all. She has body 10 and a base of 16 to her karate martial art skill. You should consider using that instead of defaulting to the EV melee weapon that Nat's character sheet lists. Why? Because it's cooler, at least in my opinion. Martial arts is such a rare skill because it's a ×2 skill. You have this chance to make it really shine. Thanks to her body 10, Nat deals 3d6 damage with a single martial art attack, and she can make 2 as an action. These attacks ignore half of Defender's armor, and Nat can also use the karate special move named Armor Breaking Combination by using her melee weapon and martial arts at the same time. If Nat hits the same target with a melee weapon and a martial arts attack in a single turn, she can attempt a martial arts move Resolution with a difficulty value of 15. If she succeeds, the target she hit twice has all their word armor ablated by 2 additional points. Unfortunately, Nat cannot use Bone Breaking Strike because she lacks the requirement of having wield 8. I suggest you also use Nat's equipment. EMP grenades and their pop-up microwaver can really hit hard from characters. And remember about her Sandevistan when rolling for her initiative. I think one of the best possible resolution for this scenario is to have the characters fight Nat for a few rounds. Then realizing, as they fight, that she's a nomad and maybe even doing that kind of fighting parlay you see in a lot of action movies. Maybe they negotiate while they fight, and after getting to respect Nat's prowess, and vice versa, I hope, Nat can call for a truce and talk about her situation. One thing that initially surprised me when playing and later reading the adventure is that Nat doesn't seem to be affected by the many cyberwares she has installed. At Humanity 40 or so, however, she shouldn't be. Go check the rules for cyberpsychosis on page 202 of the core rulebook. At empathy 3 or greater, a character doesn't show any cyberpsychosis or dissociative disorder. And that's maybe for the best, because I think Nat is a very likable character and should be kept that way. My character in-game wanted to help her just because she was a nice girl that was being hunted down after they took her whole pack from her. It's easy to feel empathy for Nat, and that is by design. Good design. So keep her that way. Having so many implants and still being the person that she is tells much about her for the king here. Her empathy had to be very high. Someone in the community mentioned that, much like a Night of the Opera, this should be an investigation scenario. But in fact, it features very minimal actual investigation. I don't necessarily agree with that, to be honest. Much of the investigation in this scenario is done by Trey Santiago beforehand, and the PCs are presented with the result. They have to track down Nat, of course, but I wouldn't call that an investigation, but rather a manhunt. I think this was by design, and not just to keep the adventure short, so that it can be played over the course of a 4-hour session. This, in my opinion, is intended to play out as an action scenario, with some really cool scenes. That's probably why some combat encounters are forced upon the players. It wants to keep the pace up without slowing the party down with investigation, and it does a good job at that, although I don't really like how the scenario accomplished that result. We should stop thinking that combat is the only way to make a cliffhanger feel action-oriented. A tense negotiation, led with the right amount of pacing and focus, can be just as fast-paced and engaging as a combat, sometimes even more. There are a few things that remain to be said, but I don't want to stretch this video too much, so I'll just mention them very quickly. As I said before, I don't like how Trace asks the PCs to pick him up at the afterlife. I think it makes much more sense for them to be tasked with escorting Nat to safety on Trace's behalf, without him personally participating. He's been described as wounded, after all. Involving him personally really seems like the author trying too hard to give Trace some spotlight. I don't think he needs it. Let the characters do the escorting, and if they don't have a vehicle, then do as my GM did and just say Nat has one and is willing to let the PCs use it, if they get her to safety. Trace's promise of helping her tracking down whoever is responsible for the death of her pack should suffice. The resolution is good, and I like that the characters are given the friend or foe alternative, although I don't like how the odds are changed by Trace's personal intervention, when he says that he won't pay the PCs if they kill Nat. The characters should be aware that fighting Nat won't make Trace happy, and that accepting Global's offer will likely result in the media be pissed off and feel betrayed, but they shouldn't be so pressed toward doing exactly what Trace wants. In my game, Skylar, my character, willingly decided to help Nat after hearing her story. Many characters may resonate with her anti-corporate vengeance. Bring Trace in only if it's needed, as a last resort. Don't take agency away from your players if it's not needed. Because between you and me, this scenario is already railroaded enough as it is. The characters are basically led into the tent city, then in the warehouse, then in the Aldo Caldo camp, without even having a say on that. Let them decide how to deal with the encounters, at least. Maybe they can talk with Hardhat instead of fighting, and maybe they can understand that Nat is not the monster everyone thinks she is, thanks to a few skill checks and without Trace's intervention. Remember to make the characters, not Trace, the real protagonist. My GM did, and I was very grateful for that. Lastly, notice that the scenario is open-ended if the crew decides to help Nat. She didn't get the revenge she wanted yet, and Trace promised to help her. Maybe you can use this lead to create a new adventure of your own device in the future. Also, the scenario doesn't specify why Continental Brands started attacking Nomad Convoy's food deliveries, so you can use that as a prompt to create your own corporate conspiracy and expand this scenario into a mini-campaign. I think Staying Vigilant is best enjoyed when placed into an existing campaign, and then expanded upon after a few game sessions from the end of the scenario as written. Overall, I really like this scenario, but I think most of my enjoyment came from seeing a new GM rise and shine, taking this scenario and modifying it heavily to make it better. Ra, my GM for this scenario, did a great job. But how much did the scenario help her? Well, she had to make up a lot of things on her own, partly because she wanted to, and partly because she found the scenario lacking. I would agree with some members of the community who think that this scenario feels a little bit rushed. Much like they tried to cram into a single game session, something which may have taken up multiple games. We played it in 4 sessions, because RGM decided to add a lot of stuff, but even if I remove everything she added, I think the scenario would have taken us 6 to 8 hours approximately. That's 2 to 3 sessions, depending on how much you play and how focused your group is. Still, after reading the scenario, I think some parts of it do feel rushed. That's a shame, because other scenarios in the collection cannot be played in a single session, and as far as I know, being played as a one-shot was never a common expectation for the scenarios in Tales of the Red. Anyway, this is not too bad. With some work, you can make it better, no problem. A thing I am more concerned about is players' agency. The scenario is very railroaded, and in the worst way possible, because it doesn't want you to know. It gives the players the illusion of choice, but then proceeds to make their choices inconsequential. Do you take the quick and dangerous path, or the longer but safer one through the slums? Well, you're gonna run into a combat encounter anyway, and the difficulty for both is gonna be very much alike. Or consider the critical moment when the party enters the warehouse. You want to sneak in or attack? You can do both, but in the end, it doesn't really matter because Hard Hat and their crew are not interested in talking and they attack on sight. Even the ending suffers from this illusion of choice. You can either save Nat or kill her, and that will be great, but Trace is there for you, saying that he's not gonna pay you if you don't save the Nomad girl, instantly making the alternative far less appealing, unless the Edge Runners are solely motivated by Addis and don't care at all about their reputation. With some work, however, I think this scenario has great potential. I loved Nat as a character. I loved the scene with the sniper on the gyrocopter. I loved the warehouse infiltration, Hard Hat and crew aside. I loved the part in the slums because it was very good flavor and gave me that good cyberpunk high-tech, low-life feel. So I think that in the hands of a GM who is willing to put in some work of their own, this scenario can really be a gem. If you follow it too strictly and you're not willing to breathe some life into the NPCs, however, it could result in a railroady adventure that is enjoyable as much as it is frustrating when it takes agency away from you and gives you a quest giver that will basically make all the meaningful choices for you. Thanks for watching, Chooms. This channel is still very small and I willingly choose to focus on what I am currently playing instead of what's trending, because I like to convey my enthusiasm and expertise for things I'm actually playing. RPG are not just books, so you cannot completely evaluate a scenario just by reading it. I do this out of love and passion. Anyway, if you wish to support me, I'd really appreciate any like you can spare, and if you feel particularly kind today, a subscription would be preem. If you found this video helpful, please check my other contents for Cyberpunk RED. Until the next video, stay tuned, Chooms, because Night City never sleeps, and neither does RPG.